Hello and welcome to Toyfarerapy. I am your host, Dr. Modern Toyfare, and I am joined by my YouTube wife, the man who founded the Neca Illuminati, Mrs. Dr. Modern Toyfare, Jamar_Games, along with the man Modern Toyfare has majority custody over, 1/3 of the Figuratively Speaking podcast, Nurse Nate. And this is the very first episode of Toyfarerapy. So the way the show works is we ask our guests a handful of questions to find out what and why they collect the toys they collect. And on our first episode, we have the pleasure of interviewing Nate. So welcome to the couch, Nate. We're just gonna, we're gonna start off strong here. So this is probably gonna be a long one. What toy lines do you collect, like what draws you to them specifically?
This is I helped critique on these questions, and I'm still taken aback by this one. This is a big one. So I got to think about like where I kind of started from and where I ended up. So, let's go all the way back. 1982. Christmas. I received He-Man and Skeletor. It all starts there. I was 4 years old. And it all began. But skipping ahead most of the way, I am currently collecting still so much, but it really starts with like the NECA style movie figures and that 7-inch scale stuff. It really started with the McFarlane.
Everybody Todd McFarlane here.
Movie Maniacs. That's what really, as more of a quote unquote adult, because I think I was like 20 at the time that those things started. And so that really, got that going. And obviously McFarlane.
Everybody Todd McFarlane here.
Stepped away from it at one time, but, NECA really picked it up. So I started really buying in with cult classics. And when they were doing those lines, and then they started expanding to full lines, and now they're doing ultimates, that's still probably the biggest part of my collection. So then with that, Star Wars is the other big one. So, I've been collecting Star Wars since I've been a kid. And I can't remember, now that I said that story, I can't remember if it was the Christmas. I think it was the Christmas I actually got Chewbacca and Yoda was my first action figures. Because then I think it was the following year I got He-Man and Skeletor. But those are true
random,
stories.
Like two first characters.
Yeah.
Makes sense,
no.
Though. Makes sense.
I mean, if you're buying for a little kid, I don't even know at that point if I'd even seen Empire Strikes Back. So they probably were just like, this guy looks awesome because he's tiny, and let's offset that cost because this guy's twice as big as the other guy. So I mean, they are random. But I remember being super excited about them. I don't remember if I knew who they were, but I was excited. So, I mean, Star Wars has been with me since then. So I collected the Kenner figures when I was a kid. My brother who's 4 years older than me, he was into that stuff too. So, we were collecting the Kenner figures, and then when Kenner brought them back in 95, I was buying those, and I was keeping those carded, those Power of the Force figures with the orange cards and the green cards, and I would pin them up on my wall. I kept them carded, and I pinned them on my wall in order as they came out, which was kind of like my first foray into like my wall setup, because this was at my bedroom when I lived at home, and it was like I had all three movie posters up, and then I had all these figures around them, and it was a cool display. It really was. But those eventually faded away, and I was collecting whatever was out. But now it's the Black Series, so I've pretty much kind of left 3 3/4 inch behind, with the exception of a few small sub collections that kind of revolve around like the HasLab stuff that comes out, or the Mandalorian. So that's probably my other big one. And then G.I. Joe has been also a big thing for me as a kid. All of this stuff really stems back to being a kid.
Once a Toys R Us kid,
always a Toys R Us kid.
But I'm collecting the classified now, as I collected all the 80s figures. I didn't stay with it a ton during like the 25th anniversary era of like those modern re-releases. I have some, but I didn't go crazy on those. So that, and then of course Masters of the Universe, and then Transformers. There's a little bit of Doctor Who in there still when they release things. And then, of course, Ninja Turtles. So, Marvel Legends.
Thought we wouldn't notice, but we did.
So.
Forgot one of the biggest lines out there.
Yep. Forgot one of the biggest ones. Yeah. So, and that one was even kind of weird because, like, right when Figuratively Speaking was starting, the other podcast that I'm on or was on at this point, it's supposed to be coming back, but we'll mention that later. But very early on in that, I was only collecting the MCU figures, and I got frustrated at some point. I can't remember why, and I just decided to get out of that. So I got rid of them all, and then I was doing the Marvel Select movie figures because I was like, well, I'll get them in 7-inch. But, you know, Marvel Select would put out, 2 or 3 a year?
Yeah, they don't do
meanwhile, meanwhile, Hasbro's pumping out, waves, of like at least 3 or 4 movie figures in them and stuff like that. So then I just kind of decided, why not just collect Marvel Legends? Like all of them. That was it. Because the frustration was when I would want an MCU Build-A-Figure, I'd have to buy all these other figures I didn't want, or, so I basically talked myself into just wanting them all. So then every purchase was not a disappointment and there was nothing to be frustrated at. So,
makes total sense.
Yeah, does it? Does it? And I mean, so that one has been fun though, because it's definitely, I've always been a comic fan. I was a DC fan for the longest time, especially in like high school and college and stuff like that. But, I always liked Marvel, but, getting into the MCU figures was a great gateway to then kind of reach out and go back and look at other stuff. And some of these figures, 1 or 2 of them in a wave that I don't really know will kind of lead me into maybe checking out, some of the stories or something like that. So, I think that's all of them, maybe with a random Super 7 line or something in there somewhere. But, Godzilla. I do like Godzilla.
Yeah, you can't forget about the big thick thigh.
I'm just looking behind me. Yeah,
dragon.
He's literally on my shoulder there. But there's not, up until this point where the minute that we are recording, there is not a consistent line of Godzilla coming out.
Yeah.
NECA had released some, so I have those. Those fit in with my NECA figures, obviously. So technically, I don't collect any one main Godzilla line, but I'm hoping that'll be the case with Super 7.
Fingers crossed, for sure. So I do have a follow-up question here. With the
Mm-hmm.
Marvel Legends, so you mentioned that, it started with the MCU stuff, and then you got out of it. Does that mean that you didn't do the Toy Biz line at all?
I was buying them. I started with Spider-Man Classics I think they were called Spider-Man Classics. It was like around like 1999, 2000 or something like that. I had a few of those. And when Marvel Legends actually started with Toy Biz, I kind of bailed. 6-inch wasn't what I was into at the time. I think more I was into the NECA stuff, and I just wasn't interested. And so I never got into those big time, and I've never gone back to them because I wanted to keep it more consistent. So I kind of started really with what they called the Infinity Collection, I think it was, or the Infinity, I don't know. It was when the Winter Soldier came out. That line of Marvel Legends kind of started a higher quality. Just the bucks were better. The articulation was done better. It wasn't those ball socket legs and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
So that's really like my cutoff point. I don't tend to go back past that unless it's like a favorite character of mine. Like I do have a couple of older She-Hulks and things like that, and a random Captain America here and there just because I really like those.
Makes sense. 'Cause I remember like there was a huge like uprising of people being like, "Oh man, Toy Biz isn't doing them anymore," and the Hasbro ones, the first few waves were really bad, and
they were
to the point where people were getting out of it, and it does feel like that. Yeah, around that time is when it kind of was a pivotal moment for the Hasbro Marvel Legends, where it turned around. People started to really get into it. With He-Man, was that something where it was just consistent throughout life, or was there a period where you like stopped and came back, or?
That's a great question.
I know.
So no, I did not stay consistent with it, much to my wallet's problem. I was, pretty into it, as a kid, and I stayed with it up until like I really couldn't find anything in stores. So I have like some pretty rare stuff in the grand scheme, not like super rare, but like more of the, the more rarer pieces in the end of the line. I was still buying them. I had no idea until years later that these were hard to get or not out for very long or something like that. But I definitely went away with it until like when the 2000X cartoon started and when the toy line came out, I started buying them. But that was also, I think it was in 2002. I had just moved out on my own, and I was like, I can't really afford these. So I ended up like getting rid of them and not staying with it. And then when Classics started, that was such a nightmare to order from. So that was a MattyCollector.com only type thing. And you had to be on the website at a certain time. It was basically like NECA San Diego anxiety every month.
Oh yeah, I vaguely remember that because didn't they also show up at like, randomly like Big Lots or something like that?
Yes, because I remember I bought, I found Adora, which is the, secret identity of She-Ra. I found an Adora figure at Big Lots and I bought it because I always liked the She-Ra character, and they never made an Adora before, and I was like, oh, this is awesome, and it was only like $7.99 or something like that. And I left it in the box. I don't even know what happened to it. The Adora I have now is not that one. So something happened to it. I have no idea. But yeah, like those were awful. And so that's why I've been like, I never really intended to get that line. I just kind of kept lucking into some, but I have paid for it out the ass. And I'm really hoping that I can kind of be done for those for a while.
Yeah, that is a very deep rabbit hole to go down, especially if you like quit and come back. Because we had talked, because obviously you're a part of the Modern Toyfare family and you're there for weekly purchases. So go check us out on Twitch every Wednesdays.
It's a good time.
You had that big Motu purchase last week, so I wasn't sure if that was strictly just you missed out on them or if it was a period in time where you're like, can't do it and then came back.
It was a lot. It was that too. It was definitely that too, because the subscriptions that you were expected to get were expensive. The figures themselves were pretty pricey, and I was not in a situation financially. At the time I had a really young kid, and I wasn't doing as well, and it was tough. So those were things where you're like, sorry. And you make up for it later on, and so that's where I'm at now.
I gotcha. Yeah, I know probably a lot.
Oh my god! I forgot probably also one of the biggest ones, which is Dragon Ball.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that at all, especially knowing you. Like,
yeah.
Oh man. And I with that, I know that you have that large collection of the old figures, and I know that you didn't have those from when they first came out, because I think you've told me this, that you've had to go back and find them.
Yeah, so I have the complete Super Battle collection from Bandai. That was the Japanese releases. They came in these awesome cardboard boxes with a window on the front, and they were all numbered. They have articulated arms, and that's it.
Oh yeah,
like there's the leg movement. There's no leg movement.
They're borderline like full on McFarlane 90s figures.
Yep. But yeah, so they are, to me, they're an amazing oddity of figures. One, because the character selection is great, but and the boxes are awesome. Plus they're numbered, which I'm a huge sucker for. But what happened is that early on, Irwin who had the license in the U.S. was re-releasing those figures just on cards, their cards, and I was buying them. And a friend of mine, he was like, "Oh, I'm a huge fan, so I'm just gonna get the Japanese figures." And I was like, "Oh, awesome!" So he got all these Japanese figures, and all they're the same as the ones that I have, but like, they just were from Japan.
I said they came from the source.
Right. So, and that was cool. But then he decided he wanted to open them all. And he's like, well, do you want the boxes? And I was like, yeah. So like, I think it was like probably like for the first, 15 or something. And there's like 40 of them total because it goes into GT and stuff like that. So that's what got me started on them. And then, yeah, I ended up buying a collection. Do you guys know that I'm trying to play with my dog at the same time?
it's something, yeah.
Yeah.
There
There you go, buddy.
That's funny.
All right.
Oh man, I love surprise guest appearances.
You do. But yeah, I can't believe I almost forgot that because then that also includes SH Figure Arts now. So that's part
which
of my modern
I
collection.
can't believe that especially knowing you, the one person who I can talk about Dragon Ball with, like completely forgot to be like, oh yeah, you forgot that. So
that happens.
I guess that raises the question of in between, because obviously there was a huge kind of time where there wasn't really any good like Dragon Ball like representation on toy shelves between like when the series ended in the States and like GT finished and everything, and when Figure Arts started to do their line. So like, is that like, what made you did you just decide, oh, Figure Arts, new Dragon Ball figures, or was there the articulation a selling point? What kind of got you to really deep dive into those?
So when they initially started, I was like, oh, those are amazing, but I looked at the price and I was like, wow, like I don't understand, and I legitimately just didn't understand. I didn't have one, I didn't see them, and so like Frieza had come out, and then I remember I put in an order for Goku and through Big Bad, and then I ended up canceling it because I saw how big it was. I didn't know how big they were, and I thought for that price they should have been like, I thought they were like this big or something like that. So then when I saw how small they were, I'm like, I'm not doing that, that's dumb. And then by that point Super had started, and then I was like, oh man, I really wish there was new figures. And then a friend of mine, I was helping him move, and he was really into it, and he was doing customizing and stuff, and he had a Super Saiyan Super Saiyan Goku from Super. Yeah, he had an extra one. It didn't include the black haired head, so it was just the blue, but it had everything else. And he's like, you can have it, thanks for helping me. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. So, I take it home and I'm playing with it. And that just opened up the floodgates. And I tried to get what I could of what was, out there at the time. But of course, I had missed out on all like the San Diego exclusive anime colors. I had missed out on Krillin. I had missed out on the Android 17 and 18. But I did, tend to get a lot of the stuff that was out at the time, which did include things like Whis and Beerus, which are now, extra pricey.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I got
so
you.
now I'm full deep into that.
I feel it, because I mean, like I said, you're the one person I can talk about Dragon Ball and the figures and stuff. And I not gonna lie, I did not realize that I had started the first time around collecting the Figure Arts figures before you did. Because I was late to the game, but I got in right when 17 and 18 came out. So I got those.
Nice.
I got 17 for retail, and I had gone back and paid the insane amount for the Piccolo with the anime colors. Just 'cause I was like, that's my favorite character, and that was like one of the best fight scenes, in my opinion, from the show, is them two. So I was like, I have to at least have those two. And then I gotten like, a few others here and there, but then I, purged a bunch of stuff to make room for other stuff, and didn't make the cut. And here we are today, spending a bunch of money, and even going to be live streaming us struggling to get Comic-Con exclusives soon.
Right.
So,
but yeah, I've been collecting Dragon Ball for over 20 years now, which is crazy because, it's nuts.
I feel like it's got to be longer than that, though, because the older figures, granted, you didn't get them till after the fact. Those came out early 90s, didn't they?
No. Well, in Japan, yes, but like the Irwin stuff that I was buying, it was 99. I know, because it's really weird, because it lines up with right around the same time I met my wife, which was at the same place I bought the Dragon Ball toys, because we both worked at Toys R Us. So, those two are kind of like locked together. Even though she's not a big fan, I kind of associate that's how long I've been into Dragon Ball. So, yeah.
I think the reason why I think it was longer is just because the place where I had got them was a place that I think imported them because they had like a bunch of like oddities and like older stuff. And they had a huge selection of Dragon Ball stuff. So I'd always like go in, and they were crazy expensive, but I was like a kid. So I was like, allowance, I don't care.
Because I think those Super Battle collections started coming around 92, 93 in Japan.
Yeah, so that's like 20 years. I mean, that just means 2000. Like, that's not long ago. That makes more sense now. Moving on, though, so you named off a lot of lines that you do collect. So the question is, what's a line that you absolutely refuse? You will never buy a figure from that line.
You know, it's funny. Like, I can't say that there's anything that I would absolutely refuse to buy. I'm not a wrestling guy. So, I don't buy wrestling figures. But, I can't ever say that I wouldn't because, like, absolutely, am I going to go on to Mattel Creations tomorrow and try to get that Sergeant Slaughter? Yeah.
Holy, what is that? That's Sergeant Slaughter!
Not because it's a wrestling figure, but because it's Sergeant Slaughter. So, I probably a couple years ago would have said Transformers, but honestly, I'm having such a good time with them. And as even I said, last week, I originally wasn't going to buy any more Fortnite because that was the one thing my wife gave me shit over, and yet I still bought a Fortnite figure for her. So I don't know. I can't, even stuff like the Mego stuff, I don't care for, but I still have one or two of random, characters that have come out. I have Lego that you buy a Lego set here and there for something. That was something I never thought that, I would get into. So I don't know that ultimately I can say for sure that there is one line that I will absolutely stay away from. It would have to be, I don't know.
All right. Well,
I don't know. I don't know that there is
Nate's
one.
the never say never guy.
Never.
Yeah.
Never say never,
can't.
Nate.
Yeah. I probably wouldn't buy any Apex Legends.
Wink.
But I don't know. I
Apex
can't.
Legend Mobile come out.
Yeah. Like there's no telling what could happen. And the only reason I bring that up is because I don't really know much about it other than it's a game.
It's not a game, it's a way of life.
Yeah, there you go. To be fair, though, with that, like, I got to stay away from things that become a way of life because, I mean, I already have way too many. So,
I agree.
Which that's a great segue into the next question. So you've kind of touched on different parts of this one already, but let's get a little more into it. So, do you have any lines that you only collect certain figures of, or are you like straight completionists all the way?
So many ways to answer this, but there are definitely things that I do like a character focus on. So one would be Harley Quinn. I have a lot of Harley figures, and I do tend to just cherry pick things here and there. Like the only times I've gotten full lines of things with also her, and it was like, Mattel's Suicide Squad figures, which I am being the rest of those, but I am going to get McFarlane's.
Everybody talking McFarlane here.
Ones for the new movie, including the Harley, but those are some random times that I get all of them. Most of the time when they release a figure in a wave, that's the only one that I'm going to get. So that one is definitely for sure a character that I will get generally anytime that there's a figure released, unless it's something I have. I can't say that I'm a total completionist because there might be ones I don't have or didn't know about, or things have gotten, too pricey or something like that. And so I'll just let those go. If I come across them, great. If I get a good deal on them, even better. But, I'm not gonna freak out over that. And I've definitely tried to scale back at that overall, try not to, panic over getting certain things.
I don't need it. I definitely don't need it.
But also, even though I collect a lot of Star Wars anyway, I do get a lot of Boba Fett's, even like additional ones, maybe some scales that I don't collect, or even lines. Like I'll get like the little kid, 2-inch ones, or like there was that Galaxy of Adventures. I made sure to get the Boba Fett for that. So those are probably the only two characters though that I'm really focused on. Generally, with other lines, it's maybe a few characters, or more times than not, it's the whole wave. Especially when it comes to Marvel Legends, because I want to build a figure.
I say I feel like Marvel Legends was like one of the few that you probably 100%. But I also know that you have a tendency to be like, do I need it? No.
Yeah.
But then you get it anyway. So I was
yeah.
I was just like, where's that
happen.
line in the sand of like?
Yeah, like one of the things I've definitely done is, so like when the G.I. Joe Collectors Club was releasing their figures for the figure subscription service, and I was getting those because I really liked a lot of the stuff that the club did. So if I got a figure and it used a very similar mold, or it was exactly the same mold as another G.I. Joe figure that I knew was kind of like rare or going for a lot, I would tend to like just keep that one, the fan club one, and then sell off the regular one if I had the same mold. And I've definitely stayed away from multiples of the same mold in Transformers too. They do a lot of repaints for different like Japanese characters and stuff, and it becomes too overwhelming. Being a completionist is fun for some things, but it can be killer.
Oh yeah, it will murder your wallet, and and you'll have to buy a bunch of boxes from your friends to live in.
That cardboard house.
So now I feel like we already kind of know the answer to this question just from some of the stuff you've mentioned, but are there any, like, what lines do you keep on card versus what figures do you open? And when you open them, what do you do with all your accessories and even the boxes at that point? Because that's a lot of space.
Yeah. So there are a few lines that I have kept carded over the time, and there's a few things that I do also keep carded. So the only real like historical line that I have that's completely carded is it's going back to Dragon Ball. I do have not only the complete Super Battle collection, but then I have all of when Irwin started making their own molds and doing their own figures. I have a complete run of the main line Irwin Dragon Ball figures, which ran from like, I don't know, 2001 or 2002 to like 2004. And then Jax took over, and I kept up with that for quite a while. I got like two waves into GT and a couple waves into Z, and I got the one wave of Dragon Ball that they did. And then things just kind of Jax was releasing too much, and it was really hard to get for a while. But really it came out of a necessity because I was living in an apartment at the time and I just didn't have space. So they just went up on a wall. So, I just like pinned them up against the wall because I wasn't going to live there. I didn't care what holes were in the wall. And then it just stayed that way. They just ended up staying carded. And I was like, oh, they just look great. And then especially it was awesome once, SH Figure Arts came along and I had these great ones to open. But that's the main thing. Everything else I tend to open unless it's like, for instance, they do like a special, like kind of like a retro carded style of something. So like when Star Wars did those ones on like even the Black Series on those large Kenner style cards. Like I don't get all of them, but I'll get a few of my favorite characters that I really dig. Like they did all the bounty hunters from Empire Strikes Back, or not all of them, did several of them in their, old Kenner colors on the Kenner card. And I was like, I got to keep these carded. They just look so cool. So things like that, I definitely do. I got that NECA Batman that they released a couple years back.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. It was from like the Dark Knight collection that Kenner did. So yeah, those I definitely will keep carded. Everything else gets opened. Very few boxes then get saved. I tend to recycle everything that I can. Marvel Legends stuff, this stuff all gets broken down and gets recycled. So I don't keep any of those boxes. I do keep Super 7 boxes just because, one, they're nice. And two, when I kick it and my kid needs to sell them, they're a little bit more attractive, put everything back in the box, and there you go. I can't bring myself to get rid of those. I was keeping all my NECA Ultimates boxes for the longest time, just because they had like cool movie poster art. But then what I started doing was just taking a razor and cutting off the front and just getting rid of the box. So when it comes to the accessories, though, this is where ultimately it gets ratcheted up a notch as far as a nerd level, because I will take them. So say, for instance, like this is my Red Skull that I just recently opened. So all these extra hands. So I got his extra hands, and I've got, an extra head. And I will put them in an appropriate sized Ziploc bag that I buy at Walmart that are specially for like crafts and such. And then I will make a label that prints out. So I have a printed label.
Someone has mixed an Amazing Spider-Man in with the Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man series. This will not stand.
And it says, it says Hasbro, Marvel Legends. It would say Zenmu Wave Red Skull. And it would have all that information, and it would be then put in that little baggie, closed up shut, put in what I buy is called sweater boxes, which are these little Tupperware containers. And then I will put a sticker or a logo on the front of it that has like Marvel Legends or X-Men or Avengers or Star Wars or whatever. And then it all gets cataloged that way. Because I'll tell you, you think you're going to remember who these 4 green hands belong to, but you won't. You won't. And so, yeah, I have to keep that organized because, one, I do know I'm not going to live forever, and somebody's going to get stuck with all this crap. And then, it has to be easily, figured out at some point. And as well, if I do part with something or decide to sell something or trade something, it's really then easy to then, just pull out that box, go through really quick. Because I try to bag them then up in like, in with waves and, characters and things like that. That way everything is together and it's easily as accessible as it can be.
I would not gonna lie, I was not expecting that.
Yeah, it's a level of organization that I do not apply to anything else in my life. Like my work, nope, sorry, I don't put that much time into it. I put way more time into organizing and taking care of my accessories and toys. So I don't know.
Well,
yeah, it's bad.
Fingers crossed your boss never watches this episode.
Yeah.
So now, if our viewers have tuned in to Wednesday Night Weekly Purchases, they may already know this story, but just for the sake of, the couch and, Toyfarerapy, what is your holy grail figure? And do you have it, or are you still trying to get it?
Yeah, so it's weird. I had 2 holy grails over time. So the most recent one I just acquired. And I really don't try to use that term very often because it really should be for these items that are just almost untangible. And the first one, and the more recent one was the Masters of the Universe Classic Scare Glow. And, that one, I talked about it on Wednesday Night Purchases. That's not only is it an expensive figure, but it's just not that common. There's just, I guess there's just not that many of them. The character was it was one of those later figures that I talked about earlier. And I had no idea how rare it was until when I had the original. The whole thing is that he glows. And so, I would always set him by a light. Well, I remember one time a friend of mine was over and I, set it up in my lamp. And then, later on, my mom's like, I think I smell something burning.
It's because I'm melted, isn't it? I disgust you.
And so, like, we go into the room, and Scare Glow has literally melted to the light bulb.
No.
And I was like, I was crushed, because that was like one of my favorite characters. And years later, I was like, well, I need to replace that because that's awesome. And I was like, holy shit, this is expensive. And then the classics version was super expensive as well. It was so hard to get, so I never expected to get it. And if I was gonna put a big chunk of change into it, I honestly would rather have the one that looks better and I can display better. Mm-hmm. So you'd think that I'd want the original one back, but it's still a vintage He-Man figure at the end of the day, and those aren't great to display.
Oh, you flatter me, Comet Keeper.
So I definitely wanted that classic. So I was able to pick it up at a local store. I mean, I did pay for it, not as badly as I could have. And so that was, pretty awesome. My first one, and the first one that I ever acquired, was the G.I. Joe aircraft carrier, the USS Flag. And so as a vintage G.I. Joe fan, this is something I never had as a kid. It was a 7.5-foot long aircraft carrier playset. I mean, they don't make this stuff anymore.
Oh,
I mean, this is the kind of the things that guys my age are like, why can't Hasbro, remake the Flag? And it's like, you're an idiot, because toys are never gonna be like this again. So you have to go back and you have to get these things. I always wanted this thing as a kid. Who as a kid wouldn't want this awesome playset that's 7.5 feet long, that's bigger than you would have been at the time? I mean, it was amazing. It was $100 at the time in 1985 I think it was 85 when it came out, but it was $100 back then. That was outrageous.
That.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's expensive. And, I never had it as a kid. And, it was pretty funny because I was like, I was just kind of always looking for one. And part of the problem with it is that it's so big and some of the pieces are so massive, and you can't break them down any further. So they're really expensive to ship. And so, eBay is not always a great option for that. But I just happened to be looking. This had to be pre-2011 or 2013, because I was still working for Best Buy. But I got on eBay and I was looking, and there was one that was only going for at the time, $150. And I was like, wow, that's actually pretty cheap. And I was looking it over, and it was mostly complete. It didn't have the walkie-talkie thing and the bullhorn, and it was missing a couple pieces from the top, but it did have what was called the rear deck rail, which is one of the hardest pieces to get. I probably could pull it off there and sell it for $300 now.
Damn.
But it wasn't going that much, and I was like, oh, how much is it to ship? And it said, it would depend on location. And I was like, well, where is this located? And I look at it, and it says, my city in my state.
Great Scott.
Oh, wow.
And I was like,
So
what?
random.
What?
That's some fate right there.
And so I messaged the guy, and I was like, hey, just want to know if it's cool if I do local pickup. And he's like, yeah, that's great if you win. And it was going to end the next day. So, I was working that next day, and I remember I was like, I'm watching this auction go down, and I'm like, I need to go somewhere where I can be private. So I ran into the bathroom, and I'm in there, and I'm just watching this thing. And it's only it went up to 200. And I waited until I don't know, 4 or 5 seconds left. And I'd already told my wife, I was like, I just flopped the iPad in front of her, and I was like, look. And she's like, well, what are you going to do? And I'm like, well, I'm going to do it. And she's like, okay. Because she knew how much I wanted one. She's like, how much are you going to go for? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe 400 or something like that. But I ended up at the last, 6 seconds or whatever, I put a $500 bid on it, and I locked it in, and it ended up only going for a little over $3.
That's not bad at all.
Right. And, one of my good friends was working there at the time. Sorry, Michael, it wasn't you. But my good friend Chris was working there, and he had just gotten there. He was a half hour into a shift, and I was like, let's go to lunch and pick up my USS Flag, because he had a pickup truck. And he's like, okay. So we took off, and we took a lunch, and we drove down. The guy was I don't know, 2 miles from my house. It was insane.
That's great.
He had this massive pole building full of toys and stuff. It was crazy.
Damn.
It was nuts. So, but that's how I have my flag, which I still have. It's a pain in the ass because it is 7.5 feet long.
Yeah.
It takes up some major real estate, but it's one of those things. I'll never get rid of it. It's one of those few ones that, because I never had it as a kid, and ultimately I wanted it so bad that when I got it, I was happy with it. I got a Terrordrome, which is a G.I. Joe vehicle or playset as well. It was a Cobra playset. I ended up selling it. I never had it as a kid, and I wanted it, and I had it for a while, and it was cool. But I decided ultimately I just didn't need to keep it, and so I sold it, and I'll keep the flag though.
Yeah, I don't blame you at all, especially like something that's hard to find. Ironically, I do remember that happening. I'm pretty sure that's when we worked together. It was just back then you didn't like me, so
probably
that's why I wasn't that person that you decided to talk to.
Well, you probably at the time worked for me, and anyone who's ever had that knows that doesn't go well.
Oh man, well that's it. That's our first session is over. We got to get to know why Nate collects the things he does and some of the rather interesting habits he has.
Yeah.
So please make sure if you want to stay current with us, check us out on Instagram and Twitter at Modern Toyfare. We'll give you updates and announcements on shows. Plus, I post a bunch of pictures of toys on there as well. Please make sure to like and subscribe if you want more Toyfarerapy, weekly reviews, and just general toy talk. I will say, if you are an audio-only listener, make sure to subscribe on whatever podcast app you're on. Spotify, Pocket Cast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all of them. Just give us a subscribe, give us a review, tell your friends, tell your grandma, get the word out there. Have everyone come join us on the couch. Of course, please make sure to follow my co-hosts. We've got Jamar with Why Are You a Gamer, where he talks to people in the gaming community on why they're gamers. And then we have Nate over at Figuratively Speaking, where they talk toys and argue about what toys should come out next. And of course, go follow them on your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all that fun stuff. But thank you for watching, and don't forget to come sit on the couch.